Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the class. We have some people connected directly on Zoom, and everybody, you are welcome anytime you want to connect on Zoom in the future to participate in the class or to watch directly. But really, the idea of the class is to record for Facebook so people on Facebook can see, and also to record for YouTube so people on YouTube can see as well. On the left here, you can see the plan for the week. So this is week 16. And of course, at the moment at 11:15, we begin the free English classes. And this is another lesson to continue from the last few weeks. We try to keep some momentum with the classes and some connection. So the structure will be very similar compared to the other classes. And the focus is vocabulary, expressions, grammar, and the objective is to help, I suppose, people with the free classes. And it's good for me to grow online, and for you, hopefully it's a good opportunity to see some English classes for free, and hopefully you can learn a lot from the classes. That is the plan. Yes, there are a lot of teachers online and you have a lot of good possibilities, which is fantastic today with the internet. So this is just another class and another aspect to help. Also, in the afternoon, I have another specific class dedicated to different topics, and today the topic is grammar. You can see at the bottom here on Monday at 4 o'clock, it's a grammar class. And I think we have 3 or 4 people confirmed already. And every day we have different topics dedicated to different subjects. And it's a good idea for some people to enjoy these classes. Hopefully we have no problem with connection. Hopefully we've no distraction. I know everybody with the pandemic, we have different situations. And here we have 6 or 7 people working from home. And for you, I'm sure it's exactly the same. So hopefully there's no huge distraction. And I hope you had a very nice weekend. And here it was good. A little changes with the restrictions. So things are a bit more relaxed, a little compared to before. So that's very, very good. So we continue. And here you can see the agenda. So we continue with the introduction document first to explain the key terms of English. And after the introduction, we will continue with maybe phrasal verb list and also the idioms list. So very, very good for vocabulary, very good for expressions, very fluent expressions. And this vocabulary and these expressions are very typical from conversation, natural conversation with family, with friends, in movies, in series. So that is the idea, to really show you all the key and the real normal expressions and normal vocabulary, okay? So that's just the agenda, but it's a good objective to really show you the natural conversation and the natural expression. So I'll close this, and first I will begin with the introduction document. You can see here. For me, this is the base. It's very important to have one document that's the base and the main part of the class, because English, you need a structure, and this page explains the different structures in English. So the first part is use of English. And in use of English, you can see different parts, for example, accents. In different parts of the world, people speak English a little differently compared to accents, in relation to accents, velocities, and dialects. So even international people speaking English is a challenge. And it's very important that you are aware of the differences and the possible problems to understand people. It's a big task and it's a bit tricky to understand everybody. And that's a huge part of English. The next 2 areas for me are key. For example, the first area are phrasal verbs. They're very unique to English. If you are familiar with English, I am sure you understand phrasal verbs. But for some people who are new to English, phrasal verbs are a huge part of English, and they really, really help to understand conversation. Basically, it's a verb plus a preposition with a second significance that can change the meaning completely. So it's very, very important that you are aware of all the phrasal verbs. We have thousands and thousands of phrasal verbs. So they're really, really important because we use them all the time, okay? Similarly with idioms, idioms are like expressions, and we use expressions in every moment as well. Every type of conversation, with family, with friends, in serious conversations, informal conversations, expressions are really, really important, and idioms is another name for expressions. And here you can just see some examples. Also, conversation. So it's fundamental that you try to regularly, naturally practice your pronunciation. It's a big part of English, and it's very important to try to maintain your rhythm and try to maintain your routine to practice conversation. Pronunciation is also important because in English we have some words that are very strange for pronunciation and very irregular. So during the class, I try to identify key words to help with pronunciation. Okay, so the next section are tenses. And in English, we have different tenses when we speak because lots of people speak in different times. Okay, so we have the present simple, past simple, future simple. That's the simple concept, but it's difficult because in the past simple, we have a lot of irregular verbs. For example, I went, I spoke. So we have a lot of irregular verbs in the past simple, which is one action that's finished. The present simple is maybe one routine that you do normally, and the future simple. Okay, that's the other area. The next part is the continuous, the present continuous. I am eating, I was drinking, or sorry, I was eating is the past continuous, and the future continuous, I will be eating. So that structure is important for the activity that happens continuously in the present, in the future, and the past. That's the simple and the continuous. The next area is the perfect. So we have the present perfect and the past perfect. Yes, we have the future perfect, but the most common tenses is or are the present perfect and the past perfect. One example is I have spoken to my friend. It's finished. So it's the present perfect, but it's finished, it's completed, but the action is related to the present, or the consequences are related to the present. So I have spoken to my friend 5 minutes ago, and it's still important because I have the information. Okay, so that's the present perfect concept. The past perfect is usually the period before another action in the past simple. So I had spoken to my friend before the football match started. That's the little difference between the present perfect and the past perfect, and they're very, very frequent in English. They're a huge part of English and they are everywhere. So it's really important you're familiar with the simple, continuous, and the perfect. The next concept is the infinitive. So basically the infinitive is the preposition to plus the verb to eat, to go, to drink, to have, to walk. That's the infinitive. And we have, I think, almost every verb it's possible to create the infinitive with the preposition to. Okay, and during the class, I mentioned frequently the concept of the infinitive. So it's very important that you are familiar with that concept. Okay, conditionals are a big area in the book. The conditionals are a bit heavy for the theory. We have the 0, first, second, third mixed conditional. So the theory is a little heavy. Basically, it's related to if. So in conversation and in reality, it's a little less strict and a little more flexible, and it's related to if and the different time. So if I drink the coffee, I will have energy. Okay, so there's different rules for the conditional. It's a bit heavy in the textbook. And for example, the webinar last Monday, we focused on the conditionals. And today at the webinar, we will also continue to focus on the conditionals. So they're a big part of English and they're very, very important, and they're a little bit tricky. So they're important you're aware of them, and it's important that you are conscious of them. Okay, also, another very impressive and advanced structure is the active and the passive. So the active is normally the general structure, subject, verb, object. The typical structure is called the active, okay? But to create the passive, we change the position. So one example is the man, subject, kicked, the verb, the man kicked the ball, and to create the passive, we change the position. The ball, introduce an extra verb to be, was, kicked is the participle, by the man. That's a difficult concept if you are not familiar with it, but it is very impressive and it's a very big part of English, and the active and the passive is a very impressive tense and a very impressive structure to use in English. Okay, the other area here is grammar in general. So we have different terms in relation to grammar. That's very important, and during the class I mentioned frequently these terms. For example, a noun is a person, a place, or a thing, and every noun you need an article. In English we have two articles, the indefinite article and the definite article. For example, a house or the house. Okay, so that's the concept of the article. So when you see an article, probably you will have a noun. That's the point. Also an adjective, the function of the adjective is to describe the noun, and the position of the adjective is before the noun. For example, the house, but the adjective is big, so it describes the noun. So the big house is the typical structure. In relation to adjectives, we have comparative and superlative. For example, the house is big, but this house is bigger than this house, but the next house is the biggest house. So it's comparative and superlative. Sometimes it's regular, but other times it's irregular, depending on the syllable. And we say interesting, more interesting, most interesting is maybe the irregular structure. Also, the concept of countable and uncountable is very important as well. Is it possible to count the noun, or is it not possible? This is a bit tricky. For example, water, chocolate, money, time. It's not really possible. For example, one chocolate, no. We say one bar of chocolate. One water, no. We say one bottle of water, one glass of water. So these concepts and this category of uncountable nouns are very important in relation to how much and how many. So in relation to uncountable, we say how much chocolate do you want? How much water do you have? But countable, pens, books, televisions, how many? That's the key difference between the two. Okay, how much and how many for countable and uncountable. The adverb, the function of the adverb is to describe better the verb, and typically the adverb ends in ly, quickly, slowly, rapidly, happily, typically adverb, which describes the verb. Drink quickly, talk slowly. That's very important. And the position of the adverb is normally after the verb, and that's a key part as well. Also, modal verbs are a very particular group of verbs in relation to English. You can see can, could, may, might, shall, should, ought to, must, have to. Really, really particular and used in special areas. For example, can is for ability. I can play the piano. I can jump very high. It's my ability, but also permission. I can enter the room. I can visit my friend. So that's the purpose we use can. Could, may, and might are for possibilities and options. I could go to the cinema. I might go to the shop. I may go to the movies. Okay, so it's possibilities, options, and the three are very similar. Maybe, may, and might are a little more polite, but in general, they're very, very similar. Shall is a substitution for will, and we use shall for a question in maybe a formal situation. Shall you watch the match tonight? Shall you contact your friend? Very formal. So that's the difference really between will and shall. Shall is more formal and it's quite frequent. So yes, it is necessary to know. Should and ought to, the pronunciation is a bit difficult for the second verb, ought to, but should and ought to are for recommendation and for advice. So in situations for recommendation, you should visit your friend, you should drink more water, you ought to drink more water. Exactly the same, maybe a little more formal, a little more polite is ought to. Must and have to are obligations. You have no choice. You must collect the children. You must drink more water. There's a difference. You ought to drink more water and you must drink more water. Ought to is the recommendation or advice and must is an obligation. So there is a big difference between the two, okay? Prepositions are basically used for direction, okay? So I speak to you, I look, but direction, I look at the bottle. So direction, and for movement, I go across the road, under the bridge, direction, movement, and position. Okay, so for example, the brush is in my hand, under, over, beside, in front of, next to. We have a lot of prepositions, but basically the function of the preposition is to describe movement, direction, and position. Okay, also for the phrasal verbs, we combine the verb with the prepositions to make a second significance of a word. And again, usually they're associated. Prepositions are associated with emotion. For example, up, positive, happy, excellent, down, sad, depressing, destruction. So there's usually an association with emotion and the phrasal verb. Okay, so the next area is very interesting. For example, possessive adjective. It's my brush, your brush, his brush, her brush, our brush. That's the adjective to describe the noun. Okay, it's possessive adjective. My brush, your brush, his brush. But the possessive pronoun, or here we are, you see it here, possessive pronoun is the second column. For example, the brush is mine, the brush is yours, the brush is his, masculine, the brush is hers, feminine. So that's the big difference, especially between masculine and feminine. And the third column is the pronoun, the object pronoun, technical explanation for the name, the term. But basically the third column is give the brush to me, give the brush to you, give the brush to him, masculine, give the brush to her, feminine. So that's really, really important. The difference between him, her, and masculine and feminine. Also the difference between this, that, these, and those. The difference between another, other, the other, and the others is very important. Also the construction of the question is a big part of English, and it's a grammatical topic. And the area of suffixes and prefixes is a big importance in English. And basically the end of the word is a big indicator of the form of the word. For example, ANCE is normally the noun, the importance. Okay, IZE is typically the verb, to realize, to monetize, to fantasize. So when you see the suffix, it's a big indicator for the form of the verb. And when you learn English, it's important to keep in mind this concept. Okay. Conjunctions, we have some advanced conjunctions and we have some basic simple linkers. So it's imperative, it's very important that you're familiar with the difference between the basic linkers and the more advanced linkers. And this is a big part of really mastering English, to be very, very comfortable with the appropriate linker. Okay. And basically specific vocabulary. A lot of people want to improve vocabulary in a specific area. Of course, the best way to do this is to read. You need to read magazines, newspapers, books. You need to read a lot of different topics to improve your vocabulary, but also to help with grammar, structures, and expressions. So reading is the best medicine. Reading is the best prescription. It's really the best solution to improve your English. Also, writing is a very, very important part of English. People need to write in English, and it's very different compared to speaking, listening, reading. So writing is a different talent, it's a different ability, and writing is something that should be practiced as well. Okay. And of course, exams are very popular as well for some people. Cambridge exams, the IELTS exams are very popular, and we have created specific webinars dedicated to these classes, as you probably know. Okay. So for me, that's the most important introduction. Now I will show you English in reality. So that's the theory, that's the explanation. They are all the technical terms, but here we have an article, a real article, real story, very natural, very fluent, very advanced, and it's from the BBC. Okay, and the journalist is Jonathan Amos. So it's a very well-known source, a very well-known news channel, and the vocabulary is brilliant. So it's very fluent, and it's very important to analyze the grammar and to analyze the vocabulary and the expressions from an article similar to this. Okay, so first I will read a little just for pronunciation, and I encourage you to read yourself at the same time, maybe to practice. So at the moment, now is probably a good time for you to read this text yourself, because first we will do the pronunciation and after we will analyze the vocabulary. So A68 is the name of the iceberg. So the iceberg that became a social media star melts away. Okay, so very important vocabulary. Here you can see the picture. And this story is new for me. I am not familiar with this story, but I think it might be a little interesting, and also the vocabulary will be key. So it's wide, but extremely thin. A68 was about 230 meters thick on average. Okay, so you can see the picture, very distinct and very impressive picture. The iceberg that was for a time the biggest in the world is no more. Okay, that's the first sentence. A68, as it was known, covered an area of nearly 6,000 square kilometers, okay, 2,300 square miles, when it broke away from Antarctica in 2017. That's like a small country. It's equal to a quarter of the size of Wales. Wales in Espanol is Galas. Okay, so you have England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, Wales. So it's another country. It's a small country, but it is very important for geography, of course. Okay, so satellites show the megaberg has now virtually gone, broken into countless small fragments that the US National Ice Center says are no longer worth tracking. So not too difficult. The vocabulary is not too difficult at the moment, but after I will just explain some of the expressions. And then they say A68 calved from the Larsen Sea ice shelf on the edge of the Antarctica Peninsula, and for a year it hardly moved. But then it started to drift north with increasing speed, riding on strong currents and winds. And then the final paragraph, you can see the billion-ton block took a familiar route, spinning out into the South Atlantic towards the British overseas territory of South Georgia. A small island is where many of the biggest icebergs go to die. Caught in the local shallows, they are doomed to gradually melt away. So the final paragraph is probably more interesting in relation to vocabulary. The other paragraphs are not too difficult, but I will just explain some of the vocabulary. So in the title, the first verb is to become. So you become is like to transform. So after 6 o'clock, you become tired. After university, you become a graduate. So the verb to become, of course, is very, very important, but it is an irregular verb and sometimes it's a trick. So the past is became, and I think the participle is become. Okay, so it's a bit difficult because it is an irregular verb, and it's just important to remember the different constructions and conjugations. So the verb is to become and the past is became. That's the big point. Okay, so here a social media star, no problem, because it's estrella in Espanol, but a star is possible as well, the verb. Okay, and typical in the movie, the actor, for example, Tom Hanks is a very famous actor and he stars in the movie. So he's the protagonist. So it is a verb to star. And maybe in the football match, this player stars in the match, and it means he's maybe the most significant, or como destacar, to stand out. Okay. Now, the verb that's very important here is to melt. So it's typical with solid. When the solid transforms into water, or the ice transforms to water, the process is to melt. Okay. And it's maybe more flexible in relation to other situations in reality. So imagine a situation when somebody is annoying you a lot, and it's very typical in conversation or maybe informal that somebody is melting you or melting your brain. That's typical, maybe informal, that they are annoying you or they're constantly distracting you or, as I said, disturbing or annoying. Okay, so it's possible informal. You could say he is a melt. That means he is maybe very annoying. Okay, so that's the translation. That would be the most typical use, I think, but melt is very direct and very literal in relation to the solid. When the solid transforms to a liquid or becomes, for example, the ice cream is melting, but maybe in the temperature, when it's very hot, you can say for the person, I am melting. And that means I am very, very hot. Okay, so it's another way to say in relation to the weather, you're very, very hot. Okay, so I am melting, and the significance is very hot because of the temperature. Okay, because of the weather. They're the most typical situations. We can use it in other situations when for the process when something burns. Okay, and the significance of the preposition away is important because you are here, and at the moment the iceberg is here. But after the process, it melts away, and to away is like disappear, okay? Because we also say to pass away, and that means to disappear when somebody dies, because they are here at the moment, but they pass away. So there is a big significance with the prepositions always. It's not exactly a phrasal verb, it's just more literal, okay? Because sometimes the phrasal verb has a second, completely different significance. And that's probably just the first literal expression. Okay, so here we have very important adjective wide. In Spanish, it's amplio. And you can say wide experience, wide knowledge. And we have another word that's very similar as well, broad. And that's very typical as well. In America, people are familiar with Broadway because it's the street that's very wide with the theaters. Okay, so Broadway is obviously very, very famous. And again, you can use broad in other situations. For example, the verb to broaden your mind is like to open your mind. So the verb is possible with the adjective broad. A person can have broad shoulders, which is like very wide shoulders. That's possible as well. And the street is very typical as well. The street is very broad. And for experience, you can maybe say broad experience as well. So it's very similar to wide. And I suppose just the contexts might change a little. The next adjective is thin. So of course, this is typical for people. If the person is very thin or the person is very slim or skinny. So I suppose in this case, it's not really possible to say the iceberg is skinny. I suppose skinny and slim are more for people. But you can be a little creative, and maybe the book is very thin. So it's a little creative in conversation and in reality. But I suppose for people, we would say the three possibilities, but not for every object. Okay. Also, we can say slim chances, which means you have very small opportunity. So there are slim chances of rain today, and that means there are very small opportunities for chances. Also, there is a verb to slim, and maybe it's typical to slim down. After Christmas, I eat a lot of food, and in January, I need to slim down. Maybe for the company is very big, you have a lot of people, but now you need to reduce the numbers, so you need to slim down the numbers in the company. And then the verb to thin is typical with the hair. So when you grow older, so in more years, your hair starts to thin, and that means you're similar to lose hair, but it decreases the quantity. So your hair can thin, and the adjective is thinning as well. So of course, it is possible in different situations, and this is just another example. And that's it. So here, it's extremely thin, but it's wide. And the adjective here is very important, thick. Okay, it's related to the material espeso, I think in Espanol, like the liquid. When you make the soup has two possibilities. It can be very watery, or it can be very thick. Okay, so typical for liquid can be watery, or it can be very thick. And also with soup. So some people prefer the soup very watery with no substance, and other people prefer the soup very thick. Okay, also you can have a thick jacket, which is like a heavy jacket. And as I said before, thick can be an insult. So if you want to say the person is very stupid, if you want to insult the person, you can say he or she is very thick, and that could mean very stupid. But the second possibility is maybe angry. Okay, so if he is thick, it could be stupid or it could be angry. Okay, and that's very, very typical in conversation as well. There is another verb which is different to thick. So this is an example of the difference in the pronunciation th, thick, and just t, tick. Okay, also we have another expression in relation to tick. We say what makes that person tick, and that means like the clock, because the clock ticks. Okay, and that means tick, tick, tick. So it's a metaphor for function. So what makes that person function? Is it a motivation for the family? Is it motivation for the career? What makes that person function? What makes that person tick? Okay. Also, in conversation, you can say, how are you? And the person says, I am ticking over, or I am ticking away. Okay. So the car is ticking over, and the significance is similar to a machine, like functioning. So if it's ticking over, it's functioning, working. But this is a metaphor for people in the same. You're working your job, you're returning home, you're having your dinner, so you're surviving, so you're ticking over. Okay, so probably the translation is just to survive. Okay, so everything is okay, you're ticking over, you're functioning. Really typical in conversation, and a very good expression to identify if you want to understand native conversation and native speakers using these expressions. Okay, maybe in the bill, if the bill is increasing, for example, the electricity bill, it's ticking up. And also you can say a ticking time bomb, which is very famous as well. So you know the bomb, and maybe the bomb has a timer, so it's set and it's tick, tick, tick. So eventually the bomb will explode. But this is a metaphor for maybe the work in the office, or in if there's a problem, you expect the problem to explode. Maybe in the social situation, for example, the pandemic and no restrictions, that's a ticking time bomb, because eventually it will be a disaster and it will be an explosion. So that's a very, very typical, good example of fluent conversation. Really, really good. Also, a person can have a tick, which is maybe a physical movement. For example, if the person has a physical movement that's not natural, It's just a function of the body. The person has a tic. It's maybe some little movement of the face that's not intentional. It's possible to have a tic as well. Okay, and as I said, it's an insult with a th. So they're completely different words. Thick pronunciation and tick. Also, we say to tick the box, which is typical in an exam, tick the box. But this is a metaphor when you complete in your life something that you wanted to complete. So for example, get married, you can tick that box. Have children, you can tick that box. So again, it's very typical in conversation, in movies and in series, and in reality, we use these expressions frequently. Okay, so I think that's the most typical expressions in relation to thick and tick. And here we have a very important word as well, average. The reason this is important is because a lot of people, maybe translating from Portuguese or Spanish to English, confuse this word. I think in Spanish it's la media. So the average is maybe 8. So for example, you have the age, this person is 10, this person is 9, this person is 6. So the average, I think, is maybe 8. Okay, la media, because the other word is the medium, which is completely different. So the medium is maybe first an adjective related to size. Your jacket is medium, the burger is medium, but also maybe technology. The class, we are using the medium of the internet, you're using the medium of the laptop. So there's a big difference between average and medium. Okay, so for this reason, it's important in my opinion. The next section, we have nothing really difficult in my opinion. Here, we have a phrasal verb, which is possible in other situations. The verb is to break. So it's irregular, break, and the past is broke. That's the first point to make. The verb is to break, and the past is broke. Of course, with the verb to break, we use it in lots of situations. For your heart, you can break your heart. The bank, you can break the bank, which means that you have no money, you're bankrupt, okay? So to break a heart, to break the bank is typical as well. And I suppose, and we have another expression, the internet. If you break the internet, this is a very popular and a very modern expression. And it means when something has become so popular or something has become very viral, we say to break the internet. And that's very typical in culture and modern expressions as well. So to break the internet. To break your neck is obviously physical, number one, but there is a second significance. So to break your neck could be physical, but the second significance is you do everything to help the other person. So it's very typical in family. I break, or this person breaks their neck to arrive home on time. So they try the best to arrive home on time, and they do absolute maximum. Okay, so to break your neck is to do your absolute best. It's a really typical expression, and it's very, very logical, I suppose, but it's very fluent. To do your absolute maximum or best. Okay, as I said, break your heart, break the bank, break the internet, break your neck. In the relationship, they can break the relationship, or break up is the phrasal verb. So there's lots of phrasal verbs: break up, break down, break out. So it's very, very important. But here, to break away, I suppose, again, the significance of away is important because originally it is here, and if it breaks away, it separates. But it's typical for a group. So if you have a big group, one big group, and then you have a split, so some people go here and other people go here, they break away. So the significance is to separate, but also maybe to escape. So if you imagine the animals are in the area together, and the man or the woman controlling the animals maybe looks a different direction, and the animals break away. So they escape, okay? We say to make a break for it, and the significance is to escape, okay? So maybe with the family or maybe with your friends, it's possible in lots of situations when the person responsible is not paying attention, they are not looking, everybody makes a break for it. They try to escape, okay? So it's a big verb, it's very frequent and it's very, very important. And here it's in relation to the iceberg, breaks away, it separates from the principal iceberg, okay? Equal to, that's a typical preposition. 5 plus 5 equals 10, but it is very typical, equal to. So here you can see just a simple combination of the verb and the preposition. And that's it really. Again, here in the next paragraph, we have, I suppose, another example of broken into. So you can see the importance of the prepositions. So to break into is like to separate. Okay, so I have one cake, a big cake, and I'll break the cake into different parts. And again, it means to separate or to divide. Okay, so the break into could be separate or divide equally. Okay, so again, it's just a little detail of the preposition. And for me, this is the reason phrasal verbs are maybe the most important part of English, and the combinations of prepositions are very, very important. Yes, it's also possible to break into dance. Sorry, you can say to break dance. And this is a particular type of dancing when you go to the floor and you move on the floor very, very quickly. For example, your back is on the floor, and it's a special type of dancing. It's to break dance. And it is a possible expression. To break into dance has a little different significance. So for example, at the wedding, everybody is very serious, everybody's very formal at the beginning, but suddenly the music starts and everybody breaks into dance. So it is possible to break into dance. Of course, in the house, to break into the house has the significance to enter, like to burgle illegally. So it's very flexible. And here, the next adjective is countless. So that's very, very good adjective. And basically, the suffix less is very important. Homeless, jobless means you have no home, you have no job. But countless is a little different, and it means it's impossible to count because the number is so high. For example, I have contacted my friend countless times. So I have contacted my friend so many times, it's impossible to count. That's the significance, okay? So I have contacted the company or my friend countless times. And that means it's impossible to count because it has been so frequent, okay? We have another expression, I can count on one hand the number of times, and that's a bit more dramatic and exaggeration. So for example, if you want to exaggerate the situation, and you can say, I can count on one hand the number of times this person helped me. So that's a joke to say that this person has never really helped me. So I can count on one hand. Typical. And then countless is good as well. And fragment, I think, is similar in Portuguese and similar in Spanish. So there's no difficulty. For me, the next expression is probably here. No longer worth tracking. Okay, so for me, the first expression is no longer. It's very advanced. So normally people say, are you hungry at the moment? No, I'm not hungry. Are you hungry at the moment? I am no longer hungry. So the significance is I was hungry, but at the moment I am not. The situation has changed. That's the significance of no longer. For example, you are looking for a job, but next week I ask you and you say, no, I'm no longer looking for a job. So the significance is not anymore. So really simple, but very important. Okay, so I am no longer looking for a job. A little advanced and more impressive compared to I am not looking for a job anymore. It's exactly the same significance and really, really good example of synonyms. And I recommend that you're aware of this and you will see this again. We have another structure as well. I long for a holiday. And the significance is that you have wanted or you have desired the holiday for a long time. You long for a holiday. You long for a break. You long for a change of scenery. So you have wanted, you have desired for a long time this. That's a very good structure, a little advanced. And most people that learn English are not comfortable with this because it's a bit creative. So it's very, very good. And here it's no longer worth, and this is very important as well, like valor. And you could say, what is the worth of the book? So basically, what is the value? So obviously value in English is very similar to valor in Espanol. And we say it is not worth it, which is basically no vale la pena. So it's a very important expression in Spanish, no vale la pena. In English is, it is not worth it. Okay. Also, we say worthless, which means no value. So this book is worthless. It's no value. It's useless. Okay. So really good vocabulary. worthless, no value, useless, very, very good. And here it's like valor. Okay, so it's not worth, there's no value, tracking. Okay, and the verb is to track, which means to follow. Typical for the internet, you track the call, to identify the call, track the car. It's very typical in technology to follow or maybe to trace. Okay, so maybe they are synonyms. And we also say a device, a tracking device is the device or the gadget you put on the car to follow the car. Okay. Also, we have, of course, a track is for athletics. Pista in Espanol, an athletics track. Then we have a track suit, because a suit is a traje, but in business, you have a business suit. But in sport, for athletics, you have the track suit, which is the same concept because it's a jacket and trousers, but it's specifically for athletics. So that is a track suit, and very, very good vocabulary as well. Okay, so I think here, there's no point, there's no benefit, there's no value to continue tracking the iceberg. Okay, and the next paragraph, for me, the key word here is the edge, and I think it's borde in Espanol. So the table, you have the table and you have the edge of the table. Okay, but we have one expression, you maybe say on the edge of my seat, and that's a metaphor because you are on your seat, and if you're on the edge of your seat, you're very excited. For example, the football match is very exciting and you're moving. So physically, you're on the edge of your seat because you are very attracted to the movie. You're very attracted to the football game, and it's very, very exciting. Okay. So it's a very, very important word. The edge of my seat, you are very excited. And I think that's the most typical situations. But of course, it could be just literal, the edge of the town. Okay, on the edge of the town. You can be on the edge of society, which is maybe a little negative. And the significance is you're maybe, the person is homeless, the person is isolated from other people, so they're on the edge of the group. And it is a verb as well. To edge forward is to move forward very, very slowly. Okay, so to edge forward is similar to inch forward, and that's really fluent and very, very good vocabulary. So the inch is the measurement, the small measurement, and if you inch forward, you move forward very, very slowly. And exactly the same, if you edge forward, you move forward, but really, really slowly. Edge, edge, edge. Okay, very, very good vocabulary, very fluent. And the final expression is an edgy person. And the significance is somebody who's maybe not calm. The opposite is maybe calm, relaxed. So the person is very edgy. They're maybe very nervous. They're very active, a lot of movement. They're very edgy. So it's typical. Maybe in the conversation you say, I'm feeling a little edgy. And the significance is I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm feeling a little excited. Very, very famous. We also say to take the edge off the situation. And that maybe means to reduce the nervousness or to reduce the stress of the situation. So maybe, for example, the wedding, and everybody is very stressed and everybody's very nervous, and your friend gives you some tea to make you calm. So the tea takes the edge off the stress. Maybe for cigarettes, when you stop smoking cigarettes, you feel very anxious and you need a substitution to take the edge off the feeling. So very, very good vocabulary, very fluent, very conversational, and definitely very important to try to keep in mind. And the first word here, I've never seen before in my life, a calved from. I've never seen this before in my life, because in this context, because normally we say a calf is the muscle. So part of the muscle is the calf. And I think also the animal, the small cow, is a calf. And I think it's normally this, a calf. So for me, I've never seen this word before, so it's very curious. So I don't know. Ice shelf. Yes, there is a verb, a shelf. Or sorry, a noun, a shelf. So in the room, for the books, you have a shelf. Okay, so it's very important. And in the ocean, you have the continental shelf under the water. It's the geographical name for the shelf. But we have an expression, the shelf life, means the quantity or the amount of time that the food can live in the kitchen or on the shelf. So for example, bread has a shelf life of 2 weeks. So that means after 2 weeks, you have to throw away. So that's the significance of a shelf life. It's a metaphor for other products. It means how long you can use this product for. For example, Big Brother, the program in Brazil, I think it's just finished maybe recently, or it's still going. But the program or the concept, the shelf life of Big Brother at the beginning probably was 2 years, but now it has continued and continued. So it's very, very popular. So it's like the duration of time that something can survive, the shelf life. It is a verb to shelf, and that means maybe to put away. So for example, this book was very important, but today I don't need it, so I will shelf the book. It's a verb. And yeah, I think that's the most typical situation. Yes, there was one more expression, to be left on the shelf, and this is in relation to romantic situations or related to dating, and it's a joke. So if the person is maybe single for a long time, because everybody begins on the shelf, like in the shop, and then somebody takes you, that's the joke, that's the metaphor. But if you're left or remaining on the shelf, it means you continue to be single, maybe forever, which is obviously no problem, but that's the expression, to be left on the shelf. Maybe a bit old-fashioned expression. Okay, so that's the only other possibility I can think. And in this paragraph, hardly is very important. It hardly moved. So in Spanish, it's like casi nunca or casi nadie. It's a bit of a false friend, because hard is maybe very difficult and very tough. Okay, but if you say hardly, that means barely. We have another word as well, barely, and it means almost nothing. Okay, so I can, here's an example, I can hardly hear you. The significance is I can hear nothing. Okay, so I can hear you a little, but I can hardly hear you. It's impossible to hear everything. Or I can barely hear you. Very, very typical. So maybe this is tricky and confusing and a false friend. So you need to be very clear and very well familiar and very comfortable with the word hardly. Okay, to drift. This word for me is really, really good. Okay, so the verb is to drift. It's typical with the water. So the water, and for example, the object on the water, you have the wood, madeira, you have the wood on the water, and the wood starts to drift. Okay, it's like to lose direction or to go with the current. So to drift is like to move maybe away, to lose the direction, to lose the focus, but it's a metaphor for teenagers. So for example, the teenager studying, but maybe next year, the teenager loses the interest and starts to drift. Okay, so it's really good vocabulary. I mean, starts to move away from the important subject, move away from the study, maybe lose concentration, to lose focus. I suppose that's the best situation. We have another expression, to catch my drift, is very informal, and that means you understand. To catch is like to understand. My drift is like my energy. So I suppose that's the best translation, to catch my drift. The significance is to understand my energy, or to understand my attitude, or to understand my sentiment. Very informal, but very typical in movies. If you catch my drift, if you understand me. Okay, so basically the significance is to understand somebody. Probably informal, and that's it. I suppose in Ireland, there's a chocolate bar. There's a brand of a chocolate bar called a Drifter. There's also a music group, an old music group called the Drifters. And that's the original significance in relation to the water, to drift away, typical in the river. Okay, and here the iceberg, it's perfect. So the iceberg separates and it starts to drift away. And here the specific vocabulary for the water are the currents. Okay, so the current could be electric. So you can have an electric current, and you can also have the current from the river. Okay, and that means the movement or the direction of the current. So it is good vocabulary and very, very important. Also, if we say something is very current, that means maybe very modern. So you need to be very clear with the use of current. And again, the difference between currently and actually. So for example, currently I am in Dublin, but actually I like living here. So I suppose that's a good example. So currently is like at the moment, and actually is maybe in fact. Okay, It's a very, very interesting analysis, very interesting difference. And a lot of people, especially Spanish speakers, maybe confuse the two. So actually has the significance in fact, and currently is at the moment. So that's a big problem, because in Spanish, actualmente is at the moment, and that's the problem. Okay, and that's it. And the final paragraph, ton, is related to the weight. Okay, it's a measurement, a ton, and of course it's very, very heavy, really, really heavy, but it's a metaphor, because in English, for example, this bottle, it weighs a ton, so it's dramatic. I'm exaggerating, but we exaggerate a lot, and we use the word a ton. For example, me, after Christmas, I eat a lot of food. During Christmas, I eat a lot of food and I eat a lot of chocolate. So after Christmas, I weigh a ton. So I'm very, very heavy. So I suppose that's the use. We use it metaphorically to exaggerate a lot. And we say a ton, which means very, very heavy. Okay. Spinning out, I suppose, is important. So here, the block from the iceberg, and the verb is to spin and spin out. So it's literal. But I suppose spin is very important in relation to the washing machine. So we say a spin in the washing machine, and that means one cycle. Okay. We say to go for a spin, which means maybe to go for a drive. So if you're driving the car and you go for a spin, the significance is you go for a short drive, okay, or a cycle. So it could be a drive or it could be a cycle. And that's it. It's possible to say my mind and my head is spinning. So maybe after the party, for example, and you hear a lot of music at the party, you hear a lot of music, a lot of stimulation, a lot of talking. So after the party, the next day, your head is spinning. It continues to move. Okay, so that's very typical. My mind or my head is spinning. And also in the gymnasium, we have spinning class, which is related to the bicycle, because the wheel, you know, the spinning class is the bicycle machine that moves very, very quickly. That's spinning class, okay? There is a phrasal verb to spin off, is very important. So the original idea is here, and the next idea, which comes from the original idea, it spins off. I'll give you an example. Breaking Bad, the series on Netflix, you have Breaking Bad, and I think you have the character Saul. So Saul is the character in Breaking Bad, but this character is very popular. So they created another series focused only on Saul. So this program, Better Call Saul, is a spin-off from Breaking Bad. And that's the best example I can give you. We use it in other situations. Maybe in the car, you can drive at the roundabout and spin off to the right. So it's flexible. And very, very good vocabulary, very fluent and very typical, I suppose. Of course, we can say to spin the wheel, which is maybe in the game when you have the big competition and you spin the wheel and you receive the prize or you receive the money. So I suppose this is a metaphor to gamble or to take a risk. So if you spin the wheel, the significance is to take a risk, okay, or to gamble. And I suppose that's the significance, to take a risk or to gamble or to bet. Okay. And that's it. Okay. And then finally here, towards is the preposition. Hacia in Espanol. I'm going towards Dublin. I'm going towards the city centre. Direction, preposition. And here, overseas is good vocabulary as well. So at the moment, I'm in Ireland, but maybe in the future, the work will bring the person overseas, like abroad. So I suppose overseas has the significance of abroad, practically the same. Technically, it's over a sea, but I suppose that's really the difference. So for example, if you go from England to Scotland, it's not possible overseas and it's not possible abroad. So I suppose there is a little difference. So just be careful. But we have another verb, to oversee, which is the same pronunciation, but completely different significance. So if you oversee, you supervise. So the significance to oversee is to supervise, and that's really the difference. Here, the pronunciation is important. The S is silent, the island. So that's very important for the pronunciation. The S is silent. So we just say the island. So that's important. Caught. is the verb to catch. It's irregular. I catch the influenza. I catch the football. But the past, I caught. And we have a phrasal verb to catch up with your friend. And the significance is to ponerse el día. So to catch up with your friend is to have the news, because the last time you saw your friend, this was the situation, and you don't see. So there's more news, more news, more news. Now you need to catch up. Okay. Also with velocity in a race, if your friend is winning the race, you need to catch up. Okay. Also in the series, in the television, if you've 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3 episodes that you have not seen, so it's necessary for you to catch up. Very important phrasal verb. And the past is caught. Okay. Irregular. Catch, caught, caught. Shallow, for me, is very important vocabulary as well. It's an adjective related to the swimming pool, and we say the shallow end. So in the swimming pool, you have 2 ends. You have the deep end and you have the shallow end. So the shallow end is the small end. So it's an adjective when something is very shallow. It's related to water, for example, the sea. When you enter the sea, it's very shallow, but as you continue, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So that's the difference, shallow and deep. Okay, but this is a metaphor we also use in other situations for people. If the person is very shallow, they make a decision with no real taste or no real. So for example, maybe changing the job. If the new company offer you something extra, so you reject the loyalty of the other company and you take the other decision. So you're very shallow. You have no values or no depth in your character. So it's possible a shallow person, which is very strong and possibly an insult, but it's completely different from the verb to swallow. So you can see the similarity in spelling, but to swallow is tragar. So the water, you drink the water and you swallow, but shallow is related to the water on the size or the profundidad, the depth. Okay. So the opposite, as I said, is the deep end. And you can say the depth, profundidad. And we say to be thrown in at the deep end is a very famous expression, and that means you have a difficult beginning, a difficult start to your new job. So today is your first day and they give you the worst problem. They give you the most difficult job. So you're in at the deep end. It's a very big problem and it's very difficult. And you can say sink or swim. Okay, so I suppose that's the most most typical expression. Also with the verb to swallow, we would say maybe, and again as a metaphor, one joke, I suppose, you would swallow a brick. And a brick is a very big, so when you construct the concrete, you have a brick, ladrillo, I think. For example, the telephone, the original mobile phone was very big, like a brick. So the significance to swallow a brick, it's impossible to swallow a brick, but this is the joke for the person who is very gullible. Okay, a gullible person who would believe anything. So this person is very gullible. The person normally believes everything, even when it's a lie. So the person would say, yes, oh, I believe you, and they would swallow anything. So would believe anything. So to swallow a brick means you would believe anything or everything. Okay, it's a very good vocabulary. Also with the verb, we say to swallow your pride. And it's like orgulloso in Espanol. Pride is the noun and proud is the adjective. So if you would swallow your pride, that means you have to, a difficult moment, a difficult action, and you have to say, okay, it's difficult for me, but I swallow my pride and I accept something, okay? And that's it. So to swallow a brick is to be a very gullible person who believes everything. And the last verb here is doomed. Okay, so the adjective is doomed and the noun is a lot of doom. So it's like depressing or the end of the world. So if there is a lot of doom, it's like very dark, very depressing. It's the end of the world. And doomed means you have no hope. So the world is doomed with the pandemic. It means there's no hope. So doom is the noun. And we also say doom and gloom because gloom is maybe depressing. So there is a lot of doom and gloom today. And that means there's a lot of sad news and a lot of end of the world. So there's a lot of doom and gloom. Okay. So here they are doomed. So it means inevitable. in a negative situation. It is inevitable to gradually or slowly disappear or to melt away. Good. So that's just one paragraph, a few paragraphs in relation to the article. Again, I hope the connection was okay. Sometimes it's difficult to give the class because we have a lot of people. So I hope it's clear. I hope it's understandable. And I hope you enjoy a little, because also learning English sometimes is tricky. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's very difficult. But I hope the class can help a little. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying in contact. I'm happy because it's important to read a little every day. It's important to analyze vocabulary. It's important to see new expressions. So here you can see a lot of vocabulary. And after the class, I will put the material on the Facebook page below the video. And hopefully you can use the notes later. And also with the video, you can record and you can rewind and check the vocabulary. Okay. So I think that's everything. Remember, today we have another webinar, another specific class today at 4 o'clock. It's dedicated to grammar. I think the topic will be the conditional. So I think we have 3 or 4 people confirmed for the class, maybe 3 at the moment. And it's another opportunity to practice a little English. That's today at 4 o'clock. And tomorrow we will continue with the speaking class in the morning, which is interesting and it's challenging, but I suppose it's necessary to try to practice. And tomorrow we will also continue with the class, the free class at 11. Social media. So of course the social media, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, here is all the information for everybody. And for Facebook as well, it's the same. Remember, this class is free. I'm very happy at the moment to teach for free. It's a good opportunity for me. Well, of course, the work has changed for everybody and my work has changed the same. So since the pandemic, I changed location and now finally I have a little opportunity to teach online, and I hope you can enjoy a little. I have support at the moment from the government, which is fantastic, until I can work properly again. And hopefully this is a little step to work better. And if you want to make a little donation or a small tip to me, it's possible in 2 or 3 ways. The first possibility is by bank transfer. You can make a direct transfer by bank with no commission, and that is one possibility to make a donation. The second possibility is with Revolut. You just need the mobile phone number. It's an application. And the third possibility is the application in Spain. It's Bizum with the mobile phone number. So that's the third possibility. If you want to make a small contribution or a small donation, it would be a good help. And thank you to everybody who has supported me already. I'm very grateful for that. Okay, so I think that's the end. I hope that you enjoyed the class. Again, sometimes it's difficult, and every day to study English can be a little boring, but it's the reality, and it's probably necessary to read every day and to see some expressions. I hope the class can help a little. I hope you enjoy. I hope the quality of the connection was good, and I hope you have no problems there. So I think now we will end the Zoom call. Unless somebody wants to practice speaking, you're welcome now during the class. If not, we will finish. And thank you very much for attending. And I hope that you have a very good day and keep in contact. Now I prepare later for my next class, and I have some lunch with family, and that's it. So enjoy your afternoon, and thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.